and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mike, would you take roll, please?
Yes, I will. Chairperson Fox.
Here.
Commissioner Newsom.
Speaker louder, please.
Commissioner Voigt. Trustee Kalani.
Here.
Commissioner Grissom. Commissioner Murphy. Here. Commissioner Mitchell. Here.
All right, thank you. Next up, item 4, which is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Motion from Commissioner Kalani, second from Commissioner Mitchell. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up is item 5. This is call to the public. If you are here for agenda item 6A, which is the rezoning, please hold your questions. During the public hearing, there'll be an opportunity for you to come forward and ask questions, state opinions, those types of things. So we'll save it for that point in time. So if you want to address the Planning Commission for anything but item 6A, now would be the time. I thought so. All right, we'll close call to the public, and now we'll move on to item 6A, which is a rezoning. This is not a common, but these do occur in the township, and I'd just like to explain to you the process that we'll go through here this evening. We're going to open a public hearing in a moment, and what we will do is turn the floor over to our planning director, who will introduce to you the project or the rezoning application that has been requested. We will then have the applicant come up and allow them to make their comments in regards to their application itself. They'll return back to their seat, and then it will be your turn. And we'll have you come up one at a time, give us your name, address. You can choose to sit or stand. We don't interact during that time, but we're taking notes. So if you have questions, we will write them down. We will get your answers from the applicant when we bring them back up. So when all the questions are asked or the comments, your positions on the application itself, we'll close the public hearing. And then we'll invite the applicant back up, and we'll kind of have a conversation between the applicant, the Planning Commission, and our planning director. At that time, we'll interweave our questions in with the things that you brought up. So with that being said, we're going to open the public hearing at 7:03 for the applicant, Tony Biddix, tax ID number 4708-33-401-090. The applicant has requested to rezone approximately 35 acres of land from SR suburban residential to I, which is industrial. The property is located west of US 23, east of Old US 23, and north of Wallace Lake Drive and West Peterson Drive. And just for the record, all our public notice requirements for this public hearing have been met. So now that we have that open, we'll move on to our first step, which is Troy Langer, our planning director, if you'd like to introduce the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Let me start off by maybe showing a zoning map. This is a zoning map for Hartland Township. I'm going to zoom in on the area that we're talking about and just kind of give you a little bit of reference. This is US 23 going north and south. This is M59 here, and then paralleling 23 is old US 23, just on the west side of 23. The area that we're looking at is in the southern portion of the township, and it's right in here. So this yellow, or portion of this yellow area, this is the 35 or approximate 35 acre piece that is under consideration. The yellow represents SR, or suburban residential zoning. That's the current zoning on this property. What I've also got is maybe an aerial view. of that. Let me try to show you. This is an aerial view. You can see 23 here, and then old 23 there, and then the property highlighted with the orange boundary is the subject property that the applicant has come in and is requesting to rezone from SR to industrial. The process that for rezoning is, there's a couple things that are required. One, they have to submit an application. They're required to provide a legal description of the property, and they're required to provide how they feel they meet the criteria for a rezoning. And then once that application has been submitted, keep in mind there's no site plan required, there's no proposed development that would be required as part of a rezoning. Once that's submitted, then staff prepares a report and basically will outline all of the uses that are permitted in the proposed industrial district, and that's been included in your packet. And then we also look at what the future land use map indicates for this property. And then we also look at the comprehensive development plan that provides a little bit more textual information. What I want to do is give you a little background on the, if I can find it here, the comprehensive or the future land use map. So this is a future land use map. This is a document that's used by townships. It's a requirement for municipalities that want to have zoning. This is a document that's intended to show where the township is going in the future. It doesn't always match the current zoning. It's intended to show as the township develops and grows, these are the areas that we see changing in the future. And so what I want to do is zoom in on this area that we're talking about. And the area that we're looking at is this 35-acre piece, and it's in purple. And just so you know what purple is, I will come over to the legend. And purple is what they call planned industrial / R&D, and that stands for research and development. And planned industrial research and development, that category effectively relates to 3 zoning categories. That would relate to research and development. That's a zoning category that would meet or fall in this future land use category. Light industrial is another category that would fall within this future land use category. And then industrial. So those are the 3 categories that could potentially, let me see if I can't get back over here. So this purple designation that you see, which goes all the way up 23 and kind of in between old 23 and US 23, the 3 zoning categories that could be in this area would be research and development, light industrial, or industrial. Now that doesn't mean that we, as a township, we would automatically rezone to match that today. That just is the vision in the future, looking outward. And it might mean that that could be rezoned in the future when certain physical improvements, maybe roadways have to be constructed, maybe infrastructure of water and sewer has to be put in place before we would be willing to rezone that. Maybe there's other items that need to be in place before the township's ready to go to that next step. And those are all things the Planning Commission has to take into consideration as part of that rezoning process. Ultimately, after the Planning Commission has examined the criteria for rezoning and has examined the comprehensive development plan, has explored the uses that could potentially go in on this property, then ultimately the Planning Commission forwards a recommendation to the Township Board. Then the Township Board will hear this case, and the Township Board will make a final binding decision on this case. So right now, This is step one of this process. The applicant is essentially asking a question. I would like to rezone this property. We have a public hearing. We bring we notify all the neighboring property owners. They have an opportunity to come in, and tonight the applicant will be getting the comments from the Planning Commission. Staff has already went through and analyzed all of those documents I've just kind of outlined to you. The staff recommendation at this point is to recommend denial of the industrial zoning category as requested. So with that, I'll just leave it open for any questions or comments that you might have.
Okay, so is there anyone representing the applicant here tonight? Would you like to come forward and give your take on what you're asking for? Anything you'd like to add that's going to give information to the Planning Commission, to the public that obviously is interested? Then we'll have you take a seat. We'll invite the public up at that point to start asking questions.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my name is Pat Keogh. I'm with Ace Civil Engineering. I'm here on behalf of Tony Biddix, who's out of town tonight, so he asked that I come to represent him. Tony's looking at this from the standpoint where the property lies. It has industrial right to the north of it. It has industrial zone property right to the west of it. It has the expressway right to the east of it. And he's looking for some type of industrial type use on it to kind of fit in with the character of his property or the surrounding properties. At this point, he has no plan details of anything. He's just looking specifically for try to get the zoning changed to allow some flexibility in moving forward through the site plan process with something that would be more industrial related. We did read Troy's comments, and we appreciate those. We're here tonight. We just like to listen to everybody's comments. Tony's a good guy. He wants to work with everybody. We're not here to try to, force something in that nobody wants. But we would like to get something as far as a rezoning on that would be more compatible with, he's got a real heavy industrial use to the north. And there's a industrial to the west. So it's very difficult to make any use out of the property as a residential use along with the expressway to the east. So we're here to listen, and we want to work with the township. We've done some work in the past here, and, we appreciate everybody's comments.
Okay, great. If you want to have a seat, take some notes. What we're going to do now is open the podium or the table, whatever you're comfortable with. Any questions or comments you have, we'll just kind of go in an orderly fashion, one at a time. When you come up, give us your name, your address. As I said, any questions or position statements you have, we will write them down. There won't be a lot of interaction. We're not ignoring you. We'll get those answered as best we can after we get through call to the public, or the public portion of the hearing. So the floor is yours. Okay.
I'm Patricia Single. I'm the president of the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association, which comprises part of it, the property directly abutting this rezoned piece. So we have a couple of questions. We were wondering if there's been an environmental impact, any kind of environmental impact study done on what the effect would be on the wetlands. The wetlands feed to a creek, which you can actually see on the map. On the other one he had up, feeds into our lake. So there's a direct concern for us for contamination. We were wondering if there'd been any kind of a limnological study done, because the properties drain into our lake, which feed into Little Bitten to Big Bitten to all the way down through the chain to the mill pond. So the impact could affect all the water table for quite an extensive distance. So the concern being that if it's just rezoned industrial, there's no buffer. Right now, while it is zoned residential, it creates a buffer between our residential neighborhood that's been there. We were originally, well, I think they started developing in the 60s. We've been platted since the 1920s. The concern being that there will be no buffer between heavy industry and the impact of that, and not just our properties. Mostly, I think the concern is the for our lake, because it feeds to our lake. So we were curious whether there's been anything like that done that would warrant people suddenly thinking that it's appropriate to change the zoning. When the cement transit plant went in, I know a lot of people walked it with the previous, was he the township supervisor? Yeah, and he kind of mentioned that, well, they'll approve the zoning up to the industrial zoning, but then this will remain residential in order to create a buffer between your properties, because literally the map that he's got up there, you'll be zoning it industrial into people's back fence. So, but even more than that, also the water, there's no water there. The road access is Wallace Lake Drive, I'm assuming, which is a county road that we can barely get down it. It would involve a great deal, I would think, of if you're going to bring in anything of any size equipment, the county would have to do some pretty serious road work on it, because there's wetlands on each side. It's really right in the middle of a big wetland area. So that's, I think, our biggest concern. We're wondering if, and will we have access to any limnological report or any environmental impact study? Will that be made available to our association? I don't know. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, so that's where our association is coming from. Okay, all right.
All right, next.
I guess the other issues that were...
Could we get your name?
Jamie Blaine, and I'm at 198 West Peterson. And so I think Pat did a good job of explaining, we are concerned about the environmental impacts in there. There's, people fish in that lake. There's a lot of activity around the lake. But it's also the concern for the property values. I'm sure, it does have a huge impact. If somebody puts a big industrial area and it butts up to your backyard, who's going to want to buy that property? So we have to be concerned about that. Then we also have the noise factor. So the wetlands and the trees there provide a noise factor. If you open that up, we already have the noise from 23. It's going to be horrendous. All that noise from old 23 is going to come right in as well. And then it's just, as Pat said, it's the traffic. That road, it's a very narrow asphalt road, and it's already, it needs repair now. And then the traffic to get in and out of there, sometimes it's unsafe. And then we have our kids there, they pick up the school bus there. So they're going to be there, and there's going to be this heavy machinery coming in and out of there. Of course, that's a concern for their safety. So.
All right, thank you. Next. Good evening.
Ken Pritchard, 85 West Peterson. I have a number of concerns about this project, one of which is that the PIRD zoning in the master plan speaks to the fact that they want to have businesses that do not create noise, dust, and heavy truck traffic. I'm not saying that they want to expand the cement plant over the entire 35 acres, but that kind of opens the door to this if you do that. The other issue is that I think the idea of the road access off of 4th, or I guess it's Wallace Lake Drive now, is based on I believe 168-foot frontage, and your zoning guidelines say that you should have 300 feet of frontage on a road to provide access to an industrial site. A big chunk of this property is wetlands and probably should never be developed, and I'm very concerned that if you open this up to an industrial zoning, it's hard to close the door, because there are probably regulations concerning wetlands that none of us control. Mitigating them someplace else, and a lot of that's federal and state stuff. I was kind of offended by the statement made in the reply from the engineering firm that represented BidX, that higher density residential was typical of a transition area between industrial and other usage. And that sort of said to me, if you've got a small lot, you can get a cement plant next to you. That just doesn't seem fair to me. That said, portions of that property could be developed for something other than an industrial usage. And I don't know that most of the folks here would have an objection to that. It's the idea that we're permitting a business which arguably has contributed an awful lot of dust and dirt to that whole corridor, and allowing it expansion into an area like that. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. Don Milner, 10500 Wallace Lake Drive. One of the concerns I have, and nobody's addressed either, is that West Peterson is, all the access of West Peterson is a private drive, and it is keyholed through Wallace Lake Drive. So all the residences have to pass through that short keyway to get out onto Old 23 as in and out of the subdivision. So if you put a industrial complex in that, we're going to have to share that with them as well. And also, the other complaint I would have is, I don't know what kind of sewer you can put in with no sewer there. I don't know what kind of septic system you could possibly put in to absorb an industrial site that would be large capacity anyway. So, and also the county doesn't do a terrific job maintaining that road. So if you add some more to it, it's not going to be a real delightful situation. Okay?
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Hello.
Hello. I would be Mrs. Milner from 10500 Wallace Lake Drive. My concerns are also the environmental impact that this would have on our location. We do have wetlands there. We have very minimal road access coming into that subdivision. We're all on wells. I know that's not a major concern to those city dwellers, but that's a major concern of mine. What impact is this going to have on our environment? And I can tell you, if this is rezoned for the cement factory, we have already had noise, dust, increased traffic, and in the 40-some years that my husband and I have lived in that subdivision, I've never seen anything like it. So, I mean, hopefully you guys are going to make the right decision here and listen to our concerns and take them to heart, because I'm not sure you would like that in your backyard either.
All right, thank you. Yep.
I know that one of the arguments that they made, or, you know, one of his reasonings why he thinks it should be rezoned is because there's industrial to the north and industrial to the west. There has to be a buffer between where the residential is. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. You have to, each one of you, ask yourself, would you want that sitting in your backyard? Would you live there? Right? So, and just for the people that are talking as far as the Livingston Concrete, the document here is indicating that it's for a Kubota Bobcat business.
I will talk on that.
Okay.
That is a different site.
Oh,
That's a
okay.
different application.
Okay.
Yep. That's coming up next on the agenda.
Oh, never mind.
Well, good evening.
Hello. Joe Taylor, I'm 435 Dane Court, so I'm on the opposite side of the expressway, but right at the end of the lake. And for me, since they've redid US 23, the noise is just unbearable. You can barely even sit in my backyard butts right up to 23. You can barely sit outside and have a conversation because of the noises and all that. And with this going across the street, it's just going to add to it. You know, I don't know if there's even possibilities of putting walls up. You know, you see that in the other parts of the city down more in the metro area of noise barriers, but ever since the county went through and cut down the trees alongside 23, it's even worse now. So that's my concern, is just the noise. I mean, that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ryan. My wife and I, Judy, have lived at 163 West Peterson for almost 42 years now. This is a big concern to us because this is literally in our backyard. The line of the zoning is 25 feet off the back of our deck. I have some photos I would like to share. These are of the land in question. May I bring them up?
Yeah, sure, just hand them there and we'll pass them on down.
This is looking from the south to the northeast, or northeast, from the south to the northwest. And this is from the very east part of this property, looking towards Livingston Concrete. Now you can see in all three pictures that marshland back there. In the owner's description, I noticed it was open meadow areas with gently rolling glades. That is not correct. That land back there is all flat, it's all water, and it's covered with cattails, which is a protected species in Michigan. The land at the present, this is the very west portion of the marsh at the head of the stream that it drains from. Now, all the other property around there, during the summer, you get the snow in the winter and the rains in the spring and all, and it floods. We've had flooding all the way up to our backyard at times. The winter of '78 was one of the worst. Last year was another bad one with all the snow that we had. And it accumulated with all that rainwater we got, and our lake was starting to flood just because of that. Now, what this property is being drained from, this is the creek that goes from the property to under West Peterson. It's just a narrow creek, kind of like a babbling brook, if you will. This entire property, plus the property from across the street at Tamarack, which has a viaduct coming under Old 23 to this property, it is all drained through an 18-inch pipe going under West Peterson. It's been flooded many times. There's nothing we can do short of tearing up our bridge and putting in a larger pipe. This one. Now this one is our backyard. See, surveyor's stake here. That is the property line question. that is 25 feet from our deck. It's 20 feet from our next door neighbor. The access to this property, they wish it to be from Wallace Lake Drive. Well, as stated, Wallace Lake Drive is not very well kept up by the county. This is the drive going into the property from Wallace Lake. And this is Wallace Lake Drive. You see there are wetlands on both sides of it.
The quality of the road is because members of our association have patched themselves, gone in and filled the holes. So it's in pretty bad shape, and it would be far worse if we didn't do it, for self-preservation. We want to get in the drive without.
Now, this is a satellite picture of the property. The wetlands, which I speak with the cattails, is this entire spot right in the middle of it. The Livingston concrete, the chalk block, that's the corner. That's the land we're looking at here. To rezone this property to industrial would be a travesty. To destroy these wetlands, to possibly promote flooding to our lake, our backyards, the runoff from parking lots, containing oil from cars, whatever dust and dirt is accumulated, salt from the parking lots, it would all come down through this drain. It's not going to handle any kind of use like that. Okay. I thank you.
Well, thank you. Anyone else this evening? You're up.
I guess so. My name is Paul Adams, and I live at 110 North Old US Highway 23, which is the parcel just south of Wallace Lake at Old 23. And I just wanted to remind or reiterate in regards to the economic impact or study, when you're talking about retaining water and the low-lying areas with the cattails and so forth. All of that obviously is the filter system for all the surrounding property that runs through that parcel and into the lake. So I don't think that a economic, or not economic, but a ecological study of the impact is unreasonable. I also believe that if at all we're entertaining the fact of granting this, we should require them to come off of Old 23 and not off of Wallace Lake Road. And in turn, if we are going to make all of that industrial, then my property would be adjacent to it, and therefore I would also expect that I'd be able to have my property rezoned as well. I'm sorry I didn't call the township earlier, but this information that we're referring to, do you know if that is available on the website of the township? As far as all the paperwork, documentation, and so forth? And then the next one would be, after you have a discussion and you review, when an official vote would take place? I have a question on that one. And did I understand correctly, the very last sentence or statement you made in regards to the board reviewing the application, is that your initial response was to deny this, or did I misunderstand that?
No, the staff recommendation is denial.
The staff recommendation? Okay,
He's the staff.
Excuse my ignorance.
We have a planning department here that reviews all applications.
Okay.
to the ordinance, to the comprehensive plan, to all the tools we have available.
Correct?
They take that information, compile that information in a report to us for each application.
Okay.
In that staff report for every application, they make a recommendation on their findings. They are recommending that the vote be denial.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate
Sorry,
that.
we don't usually talk.
That's fine. Okay, thank you kindly.
And anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Bill Hershey on West Peterson, 175. Now we see some other agendas coming in that I've got property and want to get it zoned this and that. So it sounds like they don't care much about the homeowners. You know, they've got that right behind my house, and what I would like to know is how far away from my house can they build? Which I don't want it there at all, you know, because I'm right behind that wetlands. You know, and it's not just like a little pond, it's probably the size of this building that runs down the creek into our lake. You know, so the way they've got those flags, they're right on top of me. You know, I can drink a nice cold beer and hit the steak with my can. But I think, you know, to have a study of it, you know, state, or what would have them look at it, or engineer, see if it would drain. The traffic is going to be an absolute nightmare. Plus, you got those little kids on both sides of the corners and school buses. In the morning, you can't get out on 23. In the afternoons, the traffic is ridiculous. I'm sure you guys have been up and down 23. It's outrageous. It's getting like downtown Brighton. And for them to want that, a drive there at Wallace is ridiculous because it's on a curve to begin with. How are they going to bring any kind of trucks in there? There's no way. You know, they've got a path cut, but on both sides of the path, it's wet. You know, and they said they just now get zoned. They've already got electrical put in there. You know, they've been cutting all the trees down already at 23. That's double the noise at 23. I don't know if they had permission to do that or what. I always thought you had to have a reason for the electrical companies to come out and put all meters in and posts, and they've already done that west of 23 on Wallace Lake. So I think, you know, need a little time to study this, and I don't see how it's possible to put any kind of industrial. And the guy that was just the engineer that was here said he was going to put a residential there, but nobody'd buy the houses. Yeah. What do you think that's going to do to our homes when they put them next to us? You know, some of them homes will lose $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. So, thanks for your time, gentlemen.
All right. Well, thank you for coming up. Anyone else?
My name is, excuse me, my name is Paul Black. I live at 264 West Peterson, and I concur with everything you've heard. I concur with the recommendation of your planner that it be denied. I think we all do, because what has happened there, if it is industrial and it is developed industrial, for example, there is no buffer between that property and 10, 12 homes on the north side of West Peterson. It's just, it doesn't give us much of a barrier, first of all. It doesn't give us much of a concern that the township is concerned about the residents of the township. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Come on up.
I'm Yvonne Merkel. I live on 122 West Peterson. And I agree with what everybody else has said tonight, except nobody has mentioned that in the middle of the night, we can hear The concrete people, I don't know what they're doing over there. And we live right on the water, and we can hear the noise over there at 2 o'clock in the morning in our house. And so I can't even imagine the ones that have been up here, their property backs that, they have to hear that noise at night too as well. I don't. That's what they're doing, they're crushing. So they got to hear that at nighttime. And how would you like to hear that at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to sleep? The noise is ridiculous. And again, the traffic coming down that road, I just can't imagine, and all that wetlands. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
One other thing I did forget, they buy old concrete and smash it, so that's what that noise is. So you imagine how hard that press has to hit that concrete to bust it up.
Okay. Thank you.
And it comes right across that field.
Yep, I got one more thing. So I guess I would just also be concerned, I know they're not here, but we have some younger families that have moved into the neighborhood, and my concern would be for, the kids that are there. We don't have sidewalks, so, when people are walking or walking their dog, I walk my dog. I walk down Wallace, go up to 23 and turn around, so I would be concerned of the safety with the big, heavy trucks coming in and out of there. And there have been, from what I heard, there hasn't been since I've lived there, but there's been several accidents right at the corner there and several fatalities, so I would be concerned with the safety of the people in the area.
All right, thank you.
Because the traffic is like 60 miles an hour now. Great.
Sorry, I just came from work, trying up the hat in here.
You're all right.
Aaron Kress, 40 West Peterson. I've got a new 16-year-old, well, he's not new, a 16-year-old new to driving, okay? And it's a terrifying experience for him to get on and off of our street already. I've instructed him to, when he's coming sort of northbound and making a right-hand turn, if he needs to put his hazards on because of the traffic coming behind him, to go ahead and do that. That might ease them off him a little bit. So any kind of traffic that we can avoid would be great for me. I've got a 14-year-old daughter that's going to be driving soon as well, okay? So I'm very concerned about any additional traffic that's already a challenge for them. And besides all the sapient comments that everyone has made, for the love of Pete, when's it going to be enough? It's a beautiful, beautiful swath of land. You know what I mean? It's just, there's osprey that nest in the cell towers. 2 years ago, I saw the osprey fend off some bald eagles that were taking up nesting where the blue heron were nesting across the street. I don't know if you remember that, the blue heron were coming around. These bald eagles came in, I think they were juveniles because, or not juveniles, but they were a young couple. And they were a young couple and they took up a nest in the blue heron nest. I'm like, that's too small for you guys. I filmed this whole thing. The osprey didn't like it. They ended up dive bombing them and getting them out of there. But we have things like that going on in this area. Beautiful, natural things that are happening. The fish in our lake, people when they come over and fillet, when we have a fish fry, they can't believe how clean they are in that lake, okay? And I don't want to see the lateral lines all gummed up. It's beautiful right now. So I just wanted to say that and add my voice to it and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
One more quick comment.
All right.
On the lines of the traffic. Just to be aware that that is, at 23 on Wallace Lake Drive, that is our school bus stop. We did petition the school to, for most of, just decades and decades, they came in and picked the students up on our little private street. But a few years back, they decided that the bus stop was going to be at Wallace Lake and US 23. That's kindergarten bus stop. I'm not sure if you've driven by, but the speed limit is 55 at Old 23, and technically the speed limit on Wallace Lake Drive is 50. It's a county road. So there's a huge concern about that kind of traffic pulling and pulling out. Also, the road comes, the Wallace Lake Drive comes up to 23, which means in the wintertime, it can be a treacherous, both ingress and egress can be really treacherous and slippery. And there's a steep slope down into the wetlands on each side of the drive. There have been fatalities there. The last one was a woman that was struck and pushed down into the telephone pole, which is at the base on the side of the road. I mean, there've been, I think that they said there've been six or seven fatalities since the first homes were developed. I think that would have been in 1962, because it's a really busy little strip of the roadway. So that's a big concern. And then, again, as he mentioned, the quality of life. We do have a very clean lake. About maybe 8 years ago, a resident sent in a water sample from our lake to Michigan State University to see if it was okay for the kids to swim. And Michigan State University said that our drinking water was fine. That was a lake sample. The reason we have this wonderful wildlife is because we're a really clean lake. We're a kettle-bottom glacial lake, and spring-fed at a couple points and very deep. So we're a really clean lake, which is why we have the wildlife that you don't have on the shallower lakes surrounding us. And so, yeah, for quality of life for everybody. I think my big concern is we'll all be gone someday, but that lake and those wetlands and that quality of natural life, we're already in a lot of trouble all over this planet. Any place we can hold on to a little bit of Hartland type quality of life would be really nice.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to say a few more words. Years ago, when the property that Livingston County, or Livingston Concrete now sits, when it came up for review, Mr. Don Rhodes was our superintendent. And with Mr. Rhodes, Mike Horan, who was asking for the zoning, his agent, myself, of Vincenia, I can't remember her last name now, but there were about 6 or 7 of us that toured the Livingston Concrete property. Now, at that time, Mr. Rhodes was looking out over towards the south of that property, where this swampland is. He looked at that and he said, "This is as far as it should go." He knew what was in that property, what it was all about. As far as the water and the marsh in that property where these cattails are, cattails do not grow in dry ground. They have to have a steady source of water. Now, during the summer, everything else in the area may dry up. By the end of August, there's a pond behind Bill and my wife's house in the woods, and there's more over towards the west and the south there. That does get dried out because there's no river or anything to supply water to it. It's all supplied by snow melt and rain. Now, during that same time, when this is all dried out, you could go back to this marsh area where the cattails are, and they're thriving because they still have water. And years ago, we used to take our kids out there. We have 4 kids we raised there. And we used to go out in this land and just walk through it and enjoy it. And at that time, I noticed that there were streams of water coming from this marsh area. And the only way that could happen is because the water is coming out of the ground. It is not being fed by streams or that much rainfall. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else with anything new? Come on.
I'm Nicole Johnson, I'm at 61 West Peterson. I'm loud enough, I don't think I need to go up there. So I don't have anything new to add, other than, I've only been there 4 years, but I used to live in a different residence in Hartland for 15 years. It was on Hartland Woods Drive. The amount of water that is in this area is nothing compared to the drain off that came in. I used to live on Hartland Woods. There's a pond there and a wetland behind it, backed up directly to it. I will tell you that there was something, and honestly, I minded my business. I didn't look into it at the time. They did some kind of drainage work. I don't know where the water was coming from, across the road, whatever. It drained into the pond. I didn't ask any questions at the time. I will tell you, overnight, after they were done, everything was said and done, we got 5 feet of extra water in that pond and wetlands. And to this day, my ex-husband still lives there. It has never subsided. So, and I don't know where that water came from again, but it's nothing compared to the amount of water in this wetlands that would be draining into this lake, which I don't care where this lake drains to into other lakes. It's never going to get rid of that 5 feet. And anybody that's backed up to the lake can't afford to lose 5 feet of yard or back, because then that's where everybody's septics are as well. So it's really not feasible at all.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, you almost got off the hook.
Well, we want to make sure everybody has their opportunity. We want to get it so it's new stuff, but we're good.
My name's Tom Ferguson.
Okay,
I'm at
Tom.
88 West Peterson. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I
Great.
think you can. I've served 5 years during Vietnam, so I know a lot of things. And I also serve in the Hartland Senior Citizens, which I think some of you gentlemen met me at one time. If we get in this commercial property expanded towards our lake, I live on West Peterson, it's going to be terrible. Who's going to do all the sewer costs? Who's going to pay that? We can't pay it. That's baloney. Who's going to pay for it? And the road is only about 20 feet wide on Old 23, off Lost Lake. I've measured it. It's in bad shape, and it's a state road. Nothing I can do about it. I can complain all day long. Ain't going to do a thing about that road, because the state ain't going to pay for it. Pardon? Well, yeah. Yeah, it's only 28 feet wide, 20 feet wide.
You shouldn't have to mow
It's terrible. I've measured it. I used to cut all that grass going up and down our street and coming into the subdivision. I'm not going to cut it anymore. It tears up my lawn more.
Okay, they don't care.
You know, so I'm just saying, I don't think it's a good idea to make that a commercial property. I mean, industrial. We're going to have a lot of noise, a lot of construction problems, and damn if they want to come in on our driveway. They can't get in anyway. It's only 20 feet wide. It's going to be terrible with schools. And I know that from firsthand. So, you know, anyway, you guys enjoy your life. I'm not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right, we're going to close the public hearing at 7:55. We're going to ask the applicant or his representative if you want to come back up. We'll try and get some answers to some of your questions. We may be able to do that. We have, there was a question earlier, I want to make sure we cover that. All of the information that is given to the Planning Commission or to the board for their meetings, their packets, all of that information is available online. And if you go to the township's website, heartlandtwp.com, and then I think the tab may be residents. Have you ever gone there and picked it off?
Sure, I could show.
Yep. Let's show you how to get that stuff, so you know whenever. You can read all the documents that we have. Everything we have is there.
Right. So this is the township website, assuming you have somehow got to this point. If you scroll down, right down here in this blue box underneath this picture of the town hall building is a link to meeting materials. And if you click on that link, up will come a list of meetings. These are board meetings, planning commission meetings, and so forth. We are at the April 25th, 2019 meeting. You can click on just the agenda, or you can click on the agenda packet. And right here is the agenda packet. I've clicking on it. And here's the agenda, the staff report.
Enlarge it, show how you can enlarge it.
And with modern technology, I can enlarge this. So then you can see their applicant's letter. I've included some of the zoning stuff. I'm kind of scrolling through this fast, but hopefully that helps find it.
So that'll give you some information. In any township meeting, public meeting, the board meetings, planning commission meetings, in advance, that material is up there typically close to a week in advance. So you can take a peek and see what's going on, or if you want to check to see what's coming up on our next agenda, just out of curiosity, check it out there. So every piece of paper that we have is there. So we're looking at exactly what you would see. So what we want to do now is go through the staff letter that we have that was written for this application, and the staff letter is dated April 18th, 2019. And the applicant, you've read the letter, or you've seen the letter, yes, so he probably knows where some of our questions and comments are going to come. But as Troy pointed out earlier in the meeting, we have some criteria we use when looking at a rezoning of property in the ordinance. So there are steps we go through, not only in the process, but along those steps, there are stopping points. And we have 13 different items we look at to take into consideration when looking at a rezoning. So we're going to touch on all 13 of those particular items right now. Some of them within what we're talking about will answer your questions, and we were all taking notes. We'll try and cross those questions off. If we get to the end, there are a few left. We'll try and get those answers separately. You'll also notice in the 13 criteria, or the 13 steps we go through, sometimes there isn't much conversation because it's going to get combined with another criteria later in the process. So if we blow by something, in your opinion, we're probably picking it up just a little bit later. But if we take a look at the planning staff's letter dated April 18th, and we start on packet page number 6 for the commissioners, and if you wish to take a look, we have zoning ordinance rezoning criteria. This is in section 7.4.3A. Point A, consistency with the adopted comprehensive plan. So in this, we take a look at, does the application that was requested, they came to us, we didn't go to them and ask them to do this, they came to us. Is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? And I guess, Troy, I'm going to turn it to you to describe those 3 possible alternatives here.
So the comprehensive plan is not just the future land use map, it is the text of the document. It's thick, it looks just like a zoning ordinance, and also the future land use plan. What I have up here is the future land use plan. And as I already mentioned in my presentation, the area that we're looking at is in this purple. The purple future land use category relates to 3 zoning categories. So you cannot tell from just the future land use plan what the appropriate zoning category would be. You would have to look at that comprehensive development plan to further determine which zoning classification would be appropriate here. And in reading the, and I've provided the text language from the future land use plan that in my review of it, it talks about this area along Old 23, discussion about light industrial technology might be uses considered here. So what I've outlined is that, you know, the Planning Commission ultimately has to make that determination. The township staff feels that industrial would not be consistent with the comprehensive development plan.
And that is the only question we're supposed to, at the end of the day, answer here.
So that, this question is just asking just that. Is this consistent with the comprehensive plan? And our recommendation is on just that topic, no, it is not. Industrial would not be.
Any questions or comments on that? Item 7.4.3.b, compatibility with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental features. I think you'll see in the staff report, they're pointing out the wetland areas, the open water areas, and a possible stream. Any comments on that?
These all fall within Part 303 of state wetland requirements, I believe. So my question to the applicant is whether or not there's been a wetland delineation done on the parcel.
You want to come back up and maybe grab a seat, because you might be able to answer some questions, and/or if you don't know, you can. Why don't you have a seat, and Joe, why don't you ask your question again?
It would seem that this falls within the Part 303 of the Michigan Natural Resource Environmental Protection Act, that it's wetland regulated. Do you know if a wetland delineation has been done?
At this point, it's not been done. All we're looking now for is
just the zoning change.
It's just the use. And I think by virtue of a lot of the comments that came out tonight, we recognize that the property is master planned for some type of industrial. It's surrounded by industrial on a few sides. It's subject to existing noise already. And, we feel that the industrial use is more compatible with what the property really is. We realize that there's, anytime we go through these developments, when we get there, we're going to have to go through site plan process. We're going to have to delineate wetlands, do drainage studies, detailed designs. In the property, it's 35 acres, but yeah, realistically, 35 acres will not be developed. It'll be something much smaller than that. At this point, we're just looking for the use, because the use in that area is noisy, and it is, more compatible with industrial than it is residential. So that's all we're asking for at this point.
Well, you're not going to agree, but and I'm not sure where we'll be, but
Yeah, here we have to be careful. We
Right.
want to be respectful. That's why we have the hearing. We allowed everyone to speak. The applicant is here. He's got his. They have their position. We want to be fair and to allow the applicant to respond. We want to hear from him because we heard from you, and we also heard from staff. And so I think we just need to kind of let the applicant, if you have more questions or concerns, we do have another public comment at the end.
At the end of the meeting,
At the end
after
of
our
the
next agenda item.
As which are, right.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have another bite at the apple, as they say. If we could kind of get through this, the staff report and allow the applicant the fair chance to respond or address some of the issues, that'd be great.
Okay. So no environmental assessment done yet, waiting to see what happens with the zoning of the property.
Yes.
And what requirements may be.
Pardon me?
And the reason why I brought that up, and I understand that that's really not part of the, it is a large parcel. If you knew what parts were technically not, that you would either require to have a permit of some, from the DEQ, or what is the usable space, that would be helpful to me. That's kind of where I was going. It is a large parcel, 35 acres, but I'm real concerned about these wetlands because they do serve as a natural drainage or natural filtering system for the tributaries, which is the lake. And I think that the fact that where the concrete and cement factory is located in relation to, this does provide a huge buffer for that and filtering, because I don't know what that site, how they handle their stormwater, but I am concerned with this lot because of the fact that it is in between, and it looks like it's a high-quality wetland. To me, I don't know if it's a high-quality wetland, but it looks like it to me. I'm not a limnologist, but I work with a lot of wetland engineers and work with a lot of governmental entities that deal with wetland issues all the time. That's kind of my area, is storm drainage and everything else. So That's my concern.
Yeah, just one comment. Whether it's developed as a residential, research and development, industrial, that wetland will have to be dealt with, in a proper manner. It'll have to be delineated.
That's true. You're right.
Storm drainage will have to be designed around it and let storm drainage go to agricultural runoff rate. So, I know when we come in, it's confusing to a lot of people but we don't know what the future holds. But we're just trying to get a use that's a little more compatible with what's going on in the area. All this stuff will be worked out, in detail if it gets to that point through a site plan process.
But you can understand the concerns if you look at that map. The high and dry areas abut the residential street, and the far end of the concrete plant, the middle of it looks like a wetland.
Yeah, it is. There is wetlands out there. We
So I
recognize that.
think their concerns and ours would be that if the wetland were to stay, and the high and dry developable land was just in their backyard, that little strip there, and the strip up by the concrete plant, that the buffering or the distance between any type of industrial facility, particularly when you're asking for industrial, not something on the lighter end, you're asking for our most heaviest use, and I believe described in the ordinance, obnoxious with noise and odors permitted in their backyard. I understand what they're saying. That piece of information would help people understand, okay, if this was industrial, where would it really go? And right now, it would look like it would go in their backyard and backing up to the concrete plant with a big wetland in the middle of it. That's all I think that's probably answering in a layman's terms, or asking in a layman's terms why that is coming up. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, I think you addressed it. I was going to head that same direction, but it's already been stated. The way I review it and look at it, the available property to build on is being forced towards the residential at this point.
Okay. Anything, Tom?
So I would agree completely, and that's without considering the study that has to be done to find out how close they can actually get to those wetlands. So to me, if that's a fairly accurate display of the wetland, it's going to be pushed closer and closer to the residential.
Okay. Next up, item section 7.4.3.c is a reasonable return on the investment with current classification of an SR. Comments on that? I think maybe restating what you've said already.
Our only thought there is that, with the wetlands and by the time you get a road in there and try to double load a road, and you have a fairly decent distance to get back to the residential properties where you could build, and then be in an area that's probably not going to generate real high home sales or property sales, the return on the investment for a residential developer, it doesn't look favorable.
Can I just ask a general question? Help me understand the reasonable return on the investment. How long has this property owner owned this property?
That I don't know.
Okay. The property that I'm aware of has been zoned SR, I will use the word very loosely, forever. My comment on the reasonable rate of return would be, one, purchase the property with an understanding that it was zoned residential. And the return on it should be based upon the investment that they made in the SR category, which it has always been, to the best of my knowledge, and what it is today. Not to consider using the thought that if I flip it to an industrial property without consideration of the other 13 points for purposes of improving my return, it doesn't work as well for me, particularly when it was purchased under that zoning. Any thoughts on that?
No.
Joe, anything? Item 7.4.3.d is compatibility with all potential uses allowed in the proposed I district with surrounding uses and zoning. So So you're saying that it should be I because we have the concrete facility to the north, and we have a smaller piece of industrial zone there on the west?
Yeah, and we have an expressway on the east.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comments on that?
Only to reaffirm that there's suburban residential to the south. So let's make sure that that's understood as well. So,
Right.
And it needs to be compatible with the neighboring parcel to the south, which is a sensitive area, so.
Any thoughts on that?
And the residential is built up against the freeway also.
That's true.
Understood.
I think there's also a piece of CA in there, is there not?
Yep.
So there's also another piece, that small green piece up there in the second 3 of 33 is residential also. Item 7.4.3.E, capacity of the infrastructure and other public services and street system. Thoughts?
At this point, without knowing the specifics of the actual development there, it's kind of hard to specifically comment on that. I would say that, anything is developed there will have to, adhere to current regulations. I understand that the sewer and water is not in a reasonable distance there, but there is some area on the property that perks, and depending on the type of facility that goes in, we should be able to make that work, as well as, putting a water well down to supply the water service. At that point, the road access to the site, it is what it is. I mean, it's hard to deny this user access to his own site. That's pretty much it.
And I don't think there's any question to deny him access to his site.
I would agree. I think the question mark comes in what's that access, what's that property being used for, and what is that access? There's a difference in load on the road, whether you're talking residential or you're talking, again, what you asked for was our heaviest industrial use. There are other opportunities that could be research and development office, could stay SR. There are many opportunities that exist that would not fall in this heavy industrial category. So only addressing what was asked, can we change this to I, industrial zoning? The use of that road in conflict, in my opinion, with a school bus stop with an entrance to a residential neighborhood would be concerning to me. Anything else? All righty, 7.4.3.F, the capability of the street system to accommodate the expected traffic generation by uses allowed in the requested zoning. We kind of hit that one right there. The other point that should be brought out in the, I believe one of the residents obviously read the staff letter. To do an I zoning, you require street frontage of, is it 300 feet? 330 feet of street frontage. And you have 166. So you don't have the adequate frontage on Wallace Road to obtain the access for an I rezoning. And so I think that needs to be brought public, that we're short on road frontage.
Well, we're short on
property
road frontage on Wallace, but he does have over 1,100 feet of frontage on US 23, although he can't access that. So that is a question as to, well, what does that frontage require? Is it frontage on a street that you access, or is it just frontage on a public street, even if you can't access it?
Mm-hmm. I would only, for purposes of, in case the wheels are spinning here, take all of the points we're talking about in regards to the rezoning of this property and not hinge everything on that one. because there are a lot of things here, as we talked about the environmental. There are 13 points we're talking about here. If one was to purchase a parcel on Old 23 to acquire that direct access, but didn't resolve the other 12 criteria, that would not accomplish the end goal. So when we look at this, we're looking at all 13 criteria in totality, not just singularly one. Section 7.4.3.g, apparent demand for the uses permitted requested in the zoning district. Troy?
So I don't, we didn't get any kind of analysis on the intended, well, he didn't show us any intended uses, and I don't have any document that tells us there's a huge demand or shows a huge demand for industrial in this area. So basically our comment there is we don't have any information that would support that.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Biddix does or not, but I mean, he's
at this
asking
point,
for an
yeah.
industrial zoning.
Yeah, we have nothing in the works
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah. Well, there must have been something that caused it to be a request for an industrial versus a research and development or something with less intensity.
Yeah, it's, and we're certainly, we realize as part of this process, we applied for the industrial, and I believe it's the ability of the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on a lesser zoning. We realize that. Part of this was we wanted to get discussion going, talk about this, and, and then see where it led. We do feel strongly that it's just a tough property to be currently zoned is the SR. And, even if you look at the master plan and the surrounding zoning, it just fits more in with something different than the residential. And we're certainly willing to work through some of those items, to get to an end result that's a better fit for everybody.
Okay. Troy, just for a point of clarification, we cannot grant a different zoning than I or deny anything. Is the question we're being asked I or leave it alone?
My advice to this body and to the board is to make sure you answer the specific question you have been asked. The question you've been asked is, can I rezone this property from SR to industrial? As I understand it, that's the current question that's on the table, and my advice is that you make sure you answer that question. If the applicant changes that and makes a statement that we are no longer seeking industrial and I would seek a different zoning category, then that opens the Planning Commission up to additional discussion. But right now, the question you're being asked, and I have to prepare you that this goes well beyond the township level. My advice is you create an affirmative record here that answers that question.
Okay. Okay, so we are on section 7.4.3.h, ability to comply with zoning regulations. Troy, can you help us out there on that?
So this is a tricky one. I'm going to go back to the wetland map. This map, I had this up earlier. This map that you have in front of you is a wetland map from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, commonly called the MDEQ, is the only entity in the state that can determine what is a regulated wetland and where that boundary of the wetland is. They have provided maps as guides to kind of draw red flags up when there's development near that. This is what that looks like. It's not very detailed. You can kind of see the outline of some streets, but there's no property lines on here. And again, it's a guide. So the general philosophy is if something is proposed here, local municipalities such as us would then say, well, it looks like there's some wetlands on there. We need to do more investigation. So this tells me, tells Hartland Township, there's probably some wetlands on this property, and we should further investigate this. So because of that, I don't know how much of this land is buildable, developable. I'm not sure if those are real terms, but I can't ascertain if any development could be built on this property in compliance with setbacks and provide adequate parking and screening and everything else, if that helps answer that question.
Any comments on that?
No.
Anything, Joe?
No.
Okay. We are almost there. Section 7.4.3.I, appropriateness of the requested zoning district. Troy, once again, I'm just going to toss this over to you.
This one, the appropriateness of the industrial district. So I'm going to go back to the future land use map. Bear with me here. So this is what was shown on the future land use map. It's showing a purple designation, that this property could be one of 3 categories. On the zoning, it's showing it's in SR. You've got residential, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here tonight and a lot of the residents have talked about. Residential to the south, you actually even have residential across the US 23 over here. There is a small portion, well, not terribly small, bigger than the lot I live on, of residential right here, sandwiched in between this property and Old 23. And then, of course, you do have industrial. The dark gray represents industrial. The lighter gray represents light industrial. So the appropriateness of the zoning, the requested zoning, the applicant's saying, well, I'm sandwiched between the road, industrial to the north, a little bit of industrial to the west. You've got, this is a mix of uses. There's going to be conflict here with any kind of a change in this zoning, the development of this with SR, with the wetlands. There's a lot of questions because of features we don't all know. So I kind of just babbled on there, but that's a tough one. That's for you guys to decide. I have already recommended that it is not appropriate, but I've tried to throw out things on both sides for you to kind of weigh.
Any thoughts?
No, I have nothing
No?
to add.
Troy, could you, I don't know if you can get that up there. Can you get Google Maps up on your computer there?
Yep.
I would just like to respond to my personal opinion of how my reaction to this property is not appropriate for residential, given what it is. We're looking at the property right now. I see residential. These people are sitting here right now. We even have somebody from across the street. Could you just scroll south along the highway between Old 23 and US 23? Would like you, as the applicant, as Mr. Biddix, to take a look at how much residential sits between Old US 23 and US 23, on both sides of the highway, actually. It's all pretty much that until you get down into Brighton, a little closer to the interchange. So I would just like to say that I'd like Mr. Biddix to take a look again at maybe what opportunities exist here. Because it's pretty much loaded up with residential there. And I am concerned, as a planning commissioner, I am concerned as a resident of Hartland Township, I'm concerned with all of the planning experience that I've had, that we protect and buffer intensity of uses where appropriate. And I'll say again for this evening, the request that you have before us is our highest and most intense use. And I believe that the concrete factory is our highest and most intense use. And they are placed there, and they operate fine there. But that doesn't mean that it has to come any closer to that type of use has to come any closer to any type of residential use. I believe that property is a wonderful looking piece of property that could potentially provide very wonderful uses besides our highest and most intense use. And I ask you, when you meet with Mr. Biddix, that you take a look at what's going on along US 23 and don't just assume because we have a concrete plant on the north that everything below it is not going to work with what you want to do, because it obviously is there. So I just want to point that out. I'm concerned about buffering, and I'm concerned about appropriateness of the request because you went for the grand slam, and I'm just not gonna, I can't buy it.
I would echo those same remarks, but I'm also concerned with the sensitivity of the watershed right there, in particular the lake, but also the tributaries to the lake, and bringing an intense use like the industrial zoning designation. I would be very surprised if what could be placed there that wouldn't impact the watershed there in an adverse manner. And I do, and I'm familiar with the fact that today, you know, you can mitigate wetlands by purchasing credits, and you can, in a wetland bank and so forth, and there's just no reason right now to develop this piece of property the way it is in light of where we are we are the kind of the headwaters for some of the particular watersheds here. We sit in two watersheds, the Shiawassee and Huron, and we are sending our stuff down. When we do stuff in Hartland, we're sending it to other places, so I think we need to be sensitive to that, so anyway.
Any thoughts on appropriateness of the request?
Just a couple comments. I basically want to reiterate the same comments. My biggest hangup at this point in time in looking at this property as industrial is not being able to comprehend how about the amount of property that is suitable to build on. And when you look at the township's ordinances for setbacks, et cetera, where those lines are drawn relative to these sensitive wetlands. The stream that's going under Peterson Drive is flowing very forcefully at this point. I was quite surprised. It is rippling right along. So there's a lot of water back in that area that's headed towards to the lake system. And I agree with some of the other comments here. I'm very sensitive to the impact that we might be applying by just assuming that we can suggest that that property is industrial, and especially with having no idea of what particular type of business might result by that rezone.
So I think the statements are all very appropriate by everyone. What I would like to do, though, is to go where you were, Larry, is to talk about rezoning to the highest level. And so everyone doesn't have this, but in the booklet that we have, I just want to read the intent under 3.1.17 under industrial. The intent of the I industrial district is to accommodate manufacturing, assembling, and fabrication activities, including large-scale or specialized industrial operations, which have the potential of emitting obnoxious odors, generating heavy truck traffic, producing noises, displaying bright light, and other external physical effects which may impact surrounding districts. The I district is structured to permit the manufacturing, processing, and compounding of semi-finished or finished products from raw materials as well as from previously prepared materials. End quote. So with that said, that's really what could end up here. And my comments would be, I think, similar to my colleagues, is that I don't think that this particular piece of property should be intended or rezoned for that purpose.
Understood. At this point, I'm not sure if you have any more of your list to go through, but...
Two quickies.
I'll let you go through that, and then I'll
Okay.
make my comment.
All righty. Amendment of permitted or special uses for the rezoning. I don't know that we really need to talk about it at this point. We don't know what it is, so. Exclusionary or spot zoning issues.
This is probably not an exclusionary or spot zone issue, and I kind of went through and explained what exclusionary or spot zoning would be. Exclusionary or spot zoning would be to take a parcel that and rezone it to something that's completely isolated or on its own, in an island almost, from everything around it. And if you can envision a neighborhood and one lot in the middle of that neighborhood you rezone to commercial, that would be an example of an exclusionary or, well, exclusionary is almost the opposite. That'd be an example of a spot zone. This is not the case. There's industrial to the north and slightly to the west, so.
Okay. And I didn't realize I needed to turn the page, but this is really quick. Submittal has not been made, another submittal within the last year. That has not happened, and any other factors. I think we've covered a lot of them here this evening, and I guess I'd like to turn the floor over to you at this point to ask.
Yeah.
What would you like to add?
Well, I think at this point, in speaking with Tony before the meeting and reading Troy's comments and obviously hearing the public concern and your concern, I think at this point we would like to request to be tabled to give us the opportunity to kind of look at some of the other zoning options that might be available here. That I think a lot of the input we got, maybe this is a better transitional zoning to go from a general industrial maybe to a light industrial down to a suburban residential, but we at least like the opportunity to discuss that before a decision's made on it, and then come back with you and maybe offer some suggestions if that's appropriate.
Okay, that is an appropriate request and one that can be honored. So if the commission is so inclined. He's asking.
So I just need to understand the process because certainly anyone can make a motion to table it. And there's no discussion on a motion to table. My question though is, what are the options when we do that? And what was just stated by the applicant, can the applicant revise or amend his application, or does he need to submit a new application? How does that work procedurally?
So right now, the applicant is asking permission to have this case put off to a later date. I don't know if that's formally a tabling or a postponement. You, as a planning commission, have the option to ignore that and act on it anyhow, or to honor the applicant's request and adjourn this hearing to a future date. That's how I take the applicant's request. The word tabling or postponing, or you're getting into Robert's rules. I'm not an expert in that. I just prefer it be clear as to what we're doing so everybody understands.
Well, my concern is has to do with the notice. If we do a new hearing and we adjourn it, are the people entitled to their notice under the?
There would be no additional noticing requirement. We've opened the public hearing and we've closed the public hearing at this point.
Well, let me ask you this question, just getting right to the point. Can they modify the current application to request a different zoning than an I without publication of a new notice? Or is the appropriate action to vote on this evening, end this discussion, because I think I have an idea where it's going to go. And if they wish to sit down with us on an informal basis, we do offer that. And they want to reconvene on their side to discuss other options and opportunities, then they can come back with another proposal. Because I think the conclusion, well, I shouldn't say that. We are missing 3 commissioners here this evening. But there's a fairly good flavor of the group here.
I'm sure somewhere in your ordinance, because I read it, you as a planning commission have the ability to recommend a lesser zoning that's then been requested through the process. So it's my understanding that, we applied for the general industrial, and as through negotiations, you as a planning commission, if we discuss something and we're agreeable to it, could make a recommendation to the township board for something less than what we ask for.
I guess I'm going to turn to Troy, because in all the years I've been doing this, and we don't have that many zoning requests. I've not experienced that yet. I know what you said earlier in the meeting. Do you stand by that?
I do. There can be discussion, but my advice is that comes from the applicant to consider something else. and then the Planning Commission could consider that. It may state that in the ordinance. I'm looking at this going well beyond the township's role, and my thoughts are, and my advice is you always answer that question that you were asked. Right now, the question is to rezone it to industrial. And my advice is you make an affirmative decision based on that. That would put you in the best case scenario to defend that decision. If right now, the question you also have in front of you is, can you hold off on making any decision tonight? You'd like to kind of regroup and maybe put together a proposal and give it some additional consideration, is what I'm hearing.
Well, the other option, I think, is he can withdraw the application altogether.
He could. If he withdraws the application, then that would close the matter, it would end, and then if he wanted to come back with something else, he'd have to reapply. And I'll provide an additional comment, because it was kind of floating out there. If the Planning Commission postponed, tabled this discussion, and the applicant modified that request to a different zoning category, such as light industrial, such as research and development, or something else, would that have to be renoticed and a new public hearing made part of it? Absolutely. So what we're doing there is you're starting to venture into some gray area. My understanding of that is that may not require a new noticing, but the township may want to do that.
Well, can we just hearing all of that now, could the applicant request that his application be withdrawn? If Mr. Beddix is truly interested in working with everybody, he's going to want them to get their notice, because we have no vehicle to communicate with them other than by that notice. That notice comes with the request of what you apply to the township with. If he pulls his application at this time, I mean, for all,
Well, I will
is
tell you-
that application dead, or does it get revived with a new notice?
When you say pulls, is that a withdrawal?
He's going to withdraw his application.
If he withdraws it, then the application, it's done. He has stopped seeking that request, and we're done.
I mean, and you can come back in a month or two and then re-request. You can come back for the eye again if you want, or you can
Well, that's why,
talk about other options.
with everything we talked about tonight, I would prefer that it just be tabled and we have a chance to speak with Mr. Biddix personally, and we explore, some of the other options before we make a decision that, if I withdraw it, I don't believe it's not necessary from what I read in your ordinance. If it gets denied, then it puts us in a predicament where if we did want to come back with something, there's a year delay in it. So
That's where the withdrawal would come into play.
And he might very well want to withdraw it and come back, but with him not being here and him being the
Right.
owner, I would prefer if we could.
Do you want to take a minute and call him?
Pardon me?
Do you want him to take a minute and call him?
No, he's out of town.
Go ahead, Joe.
I suggested, one of the suggestions to withdraw is I'm concerned because the people here want to be notified. And that's an expense that is borne by the applicant, is my understanding, as part of the application fees.
So if you're asking, would the applicant have to pay a new fee or cover the cost of that's not clearly identified.
It's not clearly identified, right. So, Mike, this is my problem. It's the due process aspect of this proceeding, which is we have the due process rights of the applicant, but we also have the due process rights of the people who are within, I think it's 300 feet or is it 500 feet? 300 feet. So if we were to table this, the only thing we could do is they would not get the notice, is my understanding. And unless they paid attention to our website every day or every week. So don't feel comfortable with that.
I'm not comfortable with that at all. Go ahead.
You're not comfortable with the fact of not notifying the public?
With these people not getting notified
So that's
again.
where I'm at, too. I feel that the people have to be notified if there is another, right, if there's going to be any other rezoning here. But I also feel that Troy's advice to us earlier was we should answer the question at hand that we're being asked here.
The issue with doing that for the applicant is that if Mr. Biddix wishes to come back within a year, he cannot. You cannot come back. Is that correct, Troy?
One of the
A
criteria.
similar rezoning request?
Yeah.
Now, is it similar property or is it similar zoning category?
There's all sorts of little caveats that you could really have a lot of debate on this stuff. One of the criteria on a rezoning is, was this request made within a year? It doesn't automatically prevent somebody from making that application. That's just one of the things you would consider as part of your review and analysis of that. You very well may go through it and say, well, okay, that request was made a year ago, but I think there's adequate information. So it doesn't quite say you cannot make an application in a year, just that's one of the criteria you examine.
And I guess knowing that, I'm comfortable with either you pull your application, and there would have to be a new application with notice, or we vote on this evening. And then when you brought a new application, there would be notice. Tabling is not going to get notice, and we represent every taxpayer.
Well,
And
if I can, it's very common all the time to table projects after a public hearing's been held for a planned unit development. The public has been notified. They know by the process of being here that this project has been tabled and will be on the agenda next month. I don't see how that's...
we don't know when it'll be on the agenda.
Correct.
We don't know. We cannot tell these people this evening it will be on our second meeting in May.
Can you table it with that motion? Table it till the next meeting?
When we have tabled applications, which is a very rare item in this, on this body, we have set the date when it's going to return, so those people in the audience know what day that is. But we don't know what day that is, because we don't know what you're going to do. We don't know how many times you're going to come and talk to Troy. We don't know any pace of what's going on, and people have a right to know what's going on, and they need to know when it's going to happen. So we've always tabled with a date.
But it would be my understanding that if we elected to table this discussion to a later meeting, the discussion, when it came back to the board is still voting on whether or not this property should be zoned industrial, not any other light industrial planned development. We're still answering the question. The applicant doesn't have the opportunity to say, well, let me request that it be tabled and I'll revise my application now.
Well,
we're going to answer the same question.
Well, the applicant believes that we have the power to change that request to a different district. Our planning director says, no, don't go down that road. That's why I offered two options, either pull your application or we'll vote on it tonight.
And you're just voting for a recommendation that goes to the township board, correct?
That would be correct.
Yeah. But
And you
I'm
can
gonna be
take
on the
that
record.
recommendation to the board or not forward at all and go work on it and come back with a different application. And I'm not trying to be difficult, we just have to represent everybody.
Yep, I understand, and trying to represent everybody, I'm going to request that you table us, and you can do what you have to do.
Okay, I need a motion, and it doesn't have to be a motion to table.
So we've talked about a lot here. If it gets tabled, what does that mean?
I will vote no, just so you know, because you are not going to...
Table is, when you make a motion for to table something, it gets postponed to an undefined date unless you specify the date.
Okay.
Normally in a table, you don't specify.
We do it here at the Planning Commission.
But technically, a table is for indefinitely until it's removed from the table under Robert's Rules of Order by another motion to take it off the table for consideration.
I understand that. My problem is we deal with the public very much.
Exactly.
And that's my problem.
Right.
My issue is notice.
So,
And I would like to further state, just for the record, that I do believe within your ordinance that you as the planning commission, in your zoning request, there's the option to recommend a lesser zoning.
And in response to that, I didn't think your application, the information contained in the information here would merit doing such a thing if we had that authority to do that. I just don't think there's sufficient information for that. For the same reasons that we had today, I wouldn't consider, light industrial or research and development. There's just, again, it goes back to my opinion on this, is that there's a lot of wetlands here, and it doesn't appear to be accommodating the buffer strips that need to be taken care of with respect to the residential property to the south. I think at this time, there's not enough information, so I wouldn't consider that as well. So I'll make a motion to deny application number, let me get it here, rezoning application number 19-001. The request to rezone approximately 35 acres of land from SR, suburban residential, to I, industrial, for property west of US 23, east of Old US 23, and North Wallace Lake Drive and West Peterson Drive in Section 33 of Hartland Township, parcel ID number 4708-33401-090. Property owner applicant Tony Biddix.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion to deny rezoning application number 19-001. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I guess I have.
Yep, Troy.
I would encourage you to put some basis on which you're making that decision as part of the motion. If nothing else, just reference the basis that are in the staff report, and that would be sufficient in my opinion.
Points 1 through 4?
Yes, you don't necessarily need to read them verbatim, but at least make some reference that you're basing this decision, and you can reference that, as opposed to just that motion on its face.
I will revise my motion. For the basis for my motion to deny the rezoning application 19-001 is based on the staff recommendation set forth in the April 18th, 2019 memorandum to the Planning Commission, and also for the basis set forth in the comments from the board members as well.
You
support?
Okay. All righty. We have a motion to recommend denial for rezoning application 19-001. As stated here this evening, any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, we'll give the audience, if you're going to leave, you can do so quickly. We have one more application, or if you'd like to sit and hear about a potential business coming to town just north of you, you can do that, too.
We don't have to say anything more about this guy, right?
Nope, there's a call to the public after the next application. So,
What's that?
how you doing, Ryan?
Good, how are you?
Oh,
So if you would like to converse amongst yourself and all, if you would go out in the lobby, that would be greatly appreciated, because all your voices are going to transmit through the internet and on TV across the world.
It's in the Beauchamp.
Gentlemen, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Returning the pictures.
Ah.
No, that's fine.
Oh, he must have grabbed the guy in the hallway. He disappeared on us. We're waiting for Mike. Here he comes. He went to go return photographs. I guess he didn't find the guy. All right, now we are on item 7A. This is a use determination for the Kubota Bobcat dealership. I think we'll start right out with turning the floor over to Troy. Don't have to move that map much, do you?
No. Thank you. So the applicant is Carlton Kubota Bobcat dealership. They had been in front of the Planning Commission previously. They wanted to locate at the former LaFontaine automobile dealership, and I'm going to show you on a zoning map generally where that's located. This is 20 US 23 going north and south, and then this is 59 going east and west, and then this is Old 23 over here, and then the LaFontaine dealership, it was a used car dealership in this location. That property was for sale. They came in to approach the township, indicated that they would like to sell tractors, Kubota tractors and Bobcat tractors. They would sit out on the outside lot, much like the cars sat out in the lot. They would not have anything outside, no storage of any equipment. They would do some very light repair inside the building, much like LaFontaine did with some car prepping and so forth. And at that time, the Planning Commission viewed the tractors as being very similar to cars and determined that although Kubota Bobcat equipment sales is not listed anywhere in the zoning ordinance, based on that description, it seemed very similar to automobile sales and therefore could be treated much like automobile sales and could be permitted there. They went back, examined this property, talked with both Kubota and Bobcat. I believe it was the Bobcat portion said, no, we've got to have the attachments and the other ancillary equipment pieces sitting out and being displayed as well. They came back to speak with me, staff, and I said, boy, that's just not really consistent with what the Planning Commission determined in their original meeting. I said I'll work with them, and we held a site plan review committee meeting, and I said, what do you think? And the site plan review committee echoed that that's not consistent with what the original Planning Commission determination was. And we suggested that he actually look at some other sites. He indicated he has been in communication with the site further down Old 23. That property is this one little piece here that's zoned PD, this white with a crosshatch configuration just south of this red one is zoned PD. Now normally when property is zoned PD, planned development, there is an agreement that's in place that's been recorded that establishes the permitted uses in that district as well as the essentially almost zoning regulations. That isn't the case on this property. This is zone PD, and there's no PD agreement. There's no established standards here. But there is an existing operation there. It's a landscape business, and the applicant for Kubota and Bobcat indicated we would essentially occupy the building and the facility. And I've attached in your report kind of diagrams showing how their tractors and equipment would sit on the property. And staff has recommended that we've got a little bit of work to do on this, but staff has recommended the first step is to permit them in this location, allow them to enter into this property and get started. And then we really need to clean house. We really shouldn't have a PD zone piece sitting there with no standards. We really need to look at rezoning this, and probably what makes sense is rezoning this to light industrial. And what staff has said is we believe this would fit in a light industrial category, and so what we've done is provided a recommendation for you. And we may even talk with the owner of this property about that red piece. Really, that's something we should clear up as well. And with that, I'll leave it open for any further discussion that you might have.
I mean, do we need to deal with that purposes tonight?
We need to establish that this use as proposed is at least permitted here and would be permitted in the LI, and I provided a motion, and if you at least want to reference the staff report, that's fine with me.
Any questions about it? We did have an informal site plan review committee meeting with the applicant and went through this. I would say that I also am in support of permitting it in the LI district, given the, I'll just call it the outdoor display component. And it just kind of feels like it fits.
Yeah, I agree. Based upon the applicant's renderings, it looks very nice. I think it fits very well there. I would even go as far to say as, I think you have more opportunity with this parcel than the one that you originally looked at on 59, so I think it fits well.
Troy, the difference in the zoning between the M59 parcel that they had previously looked at and this is a PD.
Yep.
And the other was?
That was commercial, general commercial. So in the general commercial with automobile sales, you could have a car sitting out and displayed, but nothing else. No other items, no tires sitting outside. You couldn't have a new bike rack attachment you might put on your car. That can't sit outside. You can't have whatever you might, snow plows that you might attach to your truck. You can't have that stuff sit. None of that stuff can sit outside in the general commercial district.
Okay, yeah, so I'm fine with it also.
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission finds that the proposed use to be similar in nature and compatible to uses of the same nature or class as uses listed in the LI district.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Kalani and a second from Mitchell. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You
Appreciate
had to
it.
sit a while and wait for that one, didn't you?
I like it interesting.
Glad we could appease that need. Call to the public. Anyone? All right, no call to the public. Planners report. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were leaving.
okay, I was waiting for her.
I didn't mean to rush you.
No,
We're still
you're not rushing
open.
me.
Anyways, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for their consideration in regards to the previous proposal as far as the industrial zoning and changing of that. I thought you were very, thoughtful in regards to the community, the residents, and the impact that it might have in regards to our lakes and fresh water. A couple things I would like to probably, just publicly agree with, and then some things I would like to possibly, clear up maybe. But I noticed that they didn't have environmental impact, and I think that if they're going to change that for rezoning, that should be an important part of it. I understand it's required for construction and so forth, but at the same time, if they want to change it from a residential to any type of commercial, being that it backs up to residential, that they should definitely have to have that provided as part of the information of the request. To just kick it down the road and say, we'll worry about it once the construction begins or once the planning of construction begins, is a disservice to the residents. Also, I thought your question in regards to the length of ownership was very good one. I had written that one down as well, and I'm sorry he didn't have an answer for that. And as far as road access to the property, obviously he currently has road access to that, so we're not denying him that. But as soon as he begins to change the zoning of the property, then the road access also has to be incorporated as part of the change. And we were talking about 300 feet required for the industrial. And I would say if he wants to change to industrial, he still has to have 300 feet. And I would say, obviously, it should come off of 023. And to just say that, well, I don't have it, but I do have access, and it doesn't meet that, and therefore I should still get my rezoning, even though I don't meet the road access requirement, is not sufficient argument. Also, we talked about him having 1,100 feet of road frontage, even though he didn't have access to it, and that might qualify. I don't believe that's accurate at all, because otherwise, all the residents in the subdivision would be considered having road frontage on Old 23. Even though they're 1, 2, 3 parcels removed, I don't understand where, either you have road access and frontage or you don't. And if it's separated by a different parcel, then I would say you don't have it. Okay? And I guess that pretty much concludes what I have to say, other than I know the master plan showed that as possible industrial, but obviously that could have been a mistake if they didn't take the impact of all the swampland. And they were talking about as far as usage of it and being surrounded by industrial. I would say that on the north end of it appears to be swampland, and if they can't build there, that means they can only build on the south, and that's residential. So to say that the cement plant is there, if it bumps up to an area he can't construct on, and the only area we can't construct on is residential, then as you pointed out, then that has to be taken into account in regards to the land use change as well. I'd like to thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you very much.
Okay, have a nice evening.
You too. Troy, planners report.
I just have one item. I wanted to let you know that we did issue land use permit, and we had a pre-construction meeting for Panda Express. So as you recall, that went through a process here not that long ago, and so I would expect you'll start to see, they have to go to the building department at Livingston County, but I would expect in a few weeks or so you'll start to see some construction out there.
Okay. Committee reports, comments, anyone? We're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
Mitchell, second by Kalani. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Good night.